Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast as we are now continuing on with our previews for the NFC North. And today we have the Detroit Lions, where the Lions were such a surprise. It wasn't fully a surprise. I mean, under Dan Campbell, they started to turn themselves around at the end of the 2022 season, and we could see the vision to some degree, but playing some meaningless, back half of the season games, knocking the Packers out of the playoffs when they were already out, seemed like a fun story, but we didn't know whether or not it was actually going to pan out until 2023, and then we got that first game last year against the opening game where it was them versus the defending champion Kansas City Chiefs, and they were able to win that game. And it ended up being, an all-time season for the Lions. It was their first division title since 1993. They made the NFC Championship Game for just the second time in the franchise's history, first time since 1992. So it was obviously just such a fun storyline to follow along with them, with Hard Knocks going on as well, getting an inside look on Madman Dan Campbell and just seeing how he works behind the scenes and the buy-in with this entire roster. You look at Jared Goff as well, who's a little bit of a redemption story after he was traded along with a number of different assets for Matthew Stafford. At that point, he was just kind of a throwaway, and for him to have the type of season that he did, it was a very fun story to follow along with. And I know that NFC Championship game has to still haunt them, letting the 17-point lead in the second half fall apart, but at the same time, they're better for it. They were almost humbled in that moment. And like Dan Campbell was very adamant about coming out of the season, the Lions know that they're not sneaking up on anybody this year and that they have real expectations. But I just mentioned Jared Goff. The Lions took this offseason to re-up a number of their guys. Jared Goff included, though, a 4-year contract worth $212 million, $170 million guaranteed, fully guaranteed through the 2027 season. So they paid big for Jared Goff. And again, huge win for Goff, considering where he was sort of looked at in the grand scheme of the NFL atmosphere, and having him be able to get this redemption was an incredible thing. But there are still questions. Was it the right decision to give him all this money? And I would be very curious to hear what our viewers think in the comments section on this. Me personally, I think that I fully understand the decision. From a morale standpoint, the Lions feel like they're knocking on the doors. They didn't want to go into next season with any sort of drama that you see, across the NFC, with the Cowboys having all of their big-time franchise cornerstones, them all being contract eligible, and Jerry Jones being pretty vocal about why they aren't going about those things. No drama with the Lions right now. They're full head of steam into the next season. So I can understand that. And I don't think it was a really bad decision. But that being said, it could end up aging very poorly. So would it have been better for them to play out this year, maybe run the whole franchise tagging game at the end of it? Who knows? At the end of the day, that's all hypothetical now, and we'll have to find out from here on out, because Goff is here to stay. So are the other franchise cornerstones, like I mentioned, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Penei Sewell, the wide receiver and offensive tackles that have been huge revelations for them as well last season, and both extremely talented. 4 years, $120 million for St. Brown. 4 years, $112 million for Sewell. I love both of these players, and I am definitely on board with both of these. But again, both of these on top of Jared Goff, it's going to be a very expensive team in years to come. So they are definitely going to have to be hitting on draft picks, which is something that they've done an excellent job over the past couple years, even despite some criticism from the media about how, especially last year, the Gibbs pick and the Jack Campbell pick, that they weren't, graded all that highly by a lot of experts, but Gibbs was definitely a key contributor for that team. Jack Campbell, still waiting to see him fully develop. Definitely not going to mark that off as a home run right now, but almost good enough. And along with Brian Branch becoming a huge revelation for them in the secondary as well, I think that you have to give the Lions their credit. And Brad Holmes, I believe, is their general manager. He's keeping receipts. So this is a team that definitely, at least from a fun perspective, I'm definitely not trying to bet against right now. And also an offense that I'm not trying to bet against, because they were across the board one of the best offenses in the league last season, and it was huge for them to be able to retain Ben Johnson as their offensive coordinator. This is somebody that for the past couple years, but especially last season, was getting a ton of buzz for becoming a head coach somewhere. It sounded like even when the Lions were in the NFC Championship game, that Ben Johnson was very heavily linked to the Washington Commanders to be their next head coach, but he turned the job down and specifically said that he wants another run with this Lions team because he truly does believe in the infrastructure that they currently have. And I can't say I blame him. You look at, they have guys at pretty much every level that you could ask for, but it starts on the offensive line for them 100%, where I think they have the best unit in the NFL, at least the best 5 starting offensive linemen in the NFL. They end up losing Jonah Jackson, which is a bummer. He ends up signing a lucrative contract with the Rams, but we're at least able to get a veteran in Kevin Zeitler to have him sort of fill in the hole there, at least for this upcoming season. I thought that was a great sort of plug-and-play guy. They've used draft picks as well past couple years to try and, plug those holes as well. Took Christian Mahogany, who I think was a pretty underrated offensive lineman last year at Boston College. So their offensive line is going to be very good once again. They still have the two-headed duo of David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs in the backfield. Sione Vaki as well, out of Utah. Sneaky, crazy athlete, played both sides of the field at Utah, both running back and safety. Can't imagine he's going to be on both sides, but, just a player that I really like. Laporta continuing to develop as well. Amon-Ra, Jameson Williams. This is a very talented offense that should be in a very good position to be at the top of the league once again next year. Defensively, definitely improved over the past couple seasons, but the pretty glaring issue with them over the past couple years has been the pass defense, where last year they were 27th in the NFL in pass defense, and they tried to address it over the course of this offseason. A lot of new faces, both older and younger. They bring in Carlton Davis, who has spent the past few years in Tampa Bay. A pretty nice addition there. They bring in Amik Robertson from Las Vegas, and they use the draft as well to address the cornerback position, going with Terrion Arnold in the first round and then Ines Rakestraw Jr. late in the second round. So tried to bolster their secondary there. Like I mentioned, Brian Branch, a very nice addition for them in the second round last year. Ifeatu Melifonwu was a developing player towards the end of last season that I could see having a bigger role in the secondary for them this year again. Their front seven is already pretty good. Alex Anzalone does not get talked about enough in terms of, up there with some of the best linebackers in the NFL. I think that Derek Barnes is a very good player as well. Jack Campbell, like we just talked about, if he could fully round out into what they were hoping for when they drafted him, that would be massive. And then the continued development of Aiden Hutchinson, bring in Marcus Davenport to go across from him, should have a pretty good pass rush sign. Aleem McNeil, another very underrated player. Like, I just look across this defense, and there's a lot of names that I like. Now, again, the pass defense is where things are going to have to be different for them. And they're going to have to be, it's going to be a couple things. They're going to have to be tougher up front, and in the secondary, be more disciplined. So, you know, some new faces in there, but should be overall a pretty good squad. Looking at their schedule for next year, it's pretty middle of the pack in terms of strength of schedule. Definitely looking forward to that week 1 matchup of the rematch of the divisional card game, or the wild card game, between the Rams and the Lions then. So we'll get another edition of Matt Stafford going into Detroit to seek his revenge. I think that overall it's pretty favorable. They definitely have their share of difficult out-of-division opponents. They're in Dallas week 6, in Houston week 10, and then in San Francisco week 17. That those are definitely games that the Lions are going to have circled. That week 17 game, especially considering the NFC Championship game. But I think that it is going to be overall a very fun upcoming Lions. Actually, now that I'm realizing it, are playing all 3 teams that they played in the playoffs to reach the NFC Championship game last year. So I think that ultimately, you know, this is a good Lions team. It seems like these next couple years, especially before these new contract extensions kick in, that they're definitely, I'm not going to go window closing by any means, but time is sort of now for the Lions to strike. The NFC is still a little bit weaker at the top, and I think the Lions have an excellent window to take advantage of right now. And behind them, like I mentioned, the Packers, the Bears, and even the Vikings, once J.J. McCarthy gets healthy, you know, could definitely be a very competitive division for years to come. So Lions sort of have to take advantage now. I have them winning 12 games once again. Was hovering between the 11-12 mark, but ultimately settling on 12-5 for their regular season record. Think that they are probably going to be in prime position to win the NFC North. We're going to be coming to you with the Packers season preview tomorrow, but Lions have a great chance to once again have one of the best records in the NFL. I think that it is fully on the table for them, and I'm a believer in Dan Campbell, even if some of the 4th down decisions can be a little bit questionable. You know, this is a team that rides with them. They have sort of they have a ton of talent on the roster. They seem to have a really good team dynamic and an understanding of one another and want to win. And I mean, how just exciting was it to see the city of Detroit going berserk like that, like they were last year? So let me know in the comments section what your thoughts are on the upcoming season for the Detroit Lions. Like I mentioned, tomorrow we will be coming back with the Green Bay Packers and taking a deeper look into them to see whether or not they could potentially win the NFC North. But we are now going to be taking our next break here, and when we come back on the other side, I want to just give some final thoughts here on the NFL preseason action from over the weekend or so. There are a few things that I don't want to overreact by any means to preseason, but some things that I am definitely noting as potential red flags that I just want to highlight a little bit. So we're going to dive into all of that, but first, our next break here. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.